We all know some iconic symbols. The Statue of Liberty screams USA. The Eiffel Tower represents Paris. And this mask? Undoubtedly, it's Tutankhamun's, right? Sometimes it feels like historians have squeezed every last drop out of the King Tut story. But guess what? The most obvious details often slip right under our noses. Like the fact that this famous mask didn't actually belong to him, nor was it ever meant for him. Stick with me for the details. Can we get a close-up of that mask? Thanks. See those holes? Yep, they're for earrings. And no, it's not that they had anything against jewelry, but back in ancient Egypt, earrings were typically worn by high-status women or kids. Now, if you know your history, you might say, but Tut was a boy king, wasn't he? You're spot on. He began his reign at just 9 years old. Sadly, that didn't last long as he passed away at a very young age. So when he was 9, he might have worn earrings, but he probably took them off when he hit that no earrings age. Sounds reasonable, right? Actually, not quite. That would have been pretty strange since nobody expected him to pass away young. Certainly not at 9. So no one was preparing a kid's mask for a burial. It's this untimely demise that suggests that the mask used was simply the best option available when Tut passed away. There are more clues pointing to the idea that the mask was found in a hurry. Let's think about this. Even though Tut was mummified and his body could wait a bit, his loved ones wanted him to reach the afterlife ASAP. Some experts even believe the paint in the tomb was still wet when it was sealed. But look at his mask. It's a masterpiece. There's no way it was made in a rush. It's way more elaborate than other simpler cartonnage pieces. The renowned mask of King Tut stands 21 inches tall, adorned with precious stones, and features a golden beard that weighs 5.5 pounds, making the entire mask 22.5 pounds. Okay, I'm a bit confused here. So it seems like it was probably a kid's mask, but it had a beard? I've never seen a 9-year-old with a goatee, and I'm guessing you haven't either. Just think about it. A grown man's face compared to a kid's face. Fun fact for you, our faces pretty much stopped growing at the age of 16, so by 19, Tut would have definitely had the face of an adult man. Can you imagine trying to fit a relatively small kid's mask on a grown man? That would have been super embarrassing, and no one would have let that happen. Right, let's dismiss the kids theory. Now, the second option, if you remember, is that the mask could have originally belonged to a woman. This is where the beard theory comes into play. Some researchers believe the beard might have been added later on. Here's another twist. What if the mask was actually made for Nefertiti herself, who ended up maskless? In this case, there are two discoveries. Two birds with one stone. For now, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, I know, but let's give it a shot and delve deeper into the details. So, Tut passed away in around 1323 BCE, probably due to malaria. He had other health issues too, like when he broke his leg, and records suggest he wasn't in the best shape. As for Nefertiti, we have no solid data about her demise. Plus, nobody knows exactly when or where she was buried. The supposed year when she passed away is around 1330 BCE, but she could have lived longer, and the mask was intended and prepared for her. Or maybe they just took her mask right from the burial chamber. After all, they were family. Well, sort of. She was said to be his stepmom, having been married to Akhenaten, who was likely Tut's father. But this is not 100% accurate. Some scientists doubt it. Ah, these ancient Egyptian families. It's hard to keep track of who's who. I know, you're not yet convinced that Tut wore a lady's mask. Let me share one more theory with you. Meet Howard Carter, the enthusiastic archaeologist who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. It was located in the Valley of Kings outside Luxor, and, to everyone's surprise, was nearly intact. When he entered, he noticed something odd. This didn't feel like a pharaoh's burial chamber. It was classy and all, but it had a vibe that suggested it was made for a woman. Typically, Egyptian pharaohs had larger tombs that suited them better, and even more strangely, it was oriented to the right of the entrance. This didn't add up. That orientation was typical for female chambers, which Egyptian queens used. Another red flag was that the chamber appeared to have been built in stages, and all the artifacts, around 2,000 of them, seemed hastily placed there. Even more curious, they looked like they were meant for other royals. Carter discovered this burial site in 1922, but it remained a mystery as to why it was so bizarre. Almost a century later, Nicholas Reeves thought he may have solved the puzzle. He claimed that King Tut might not have been the original resident of the tomb. Instead, he suggested that the undisturbed resting place of the legendary Queen Nefertiti could be hidden behind the walls of the boy king's burial chamber. Nicholas studied high-resolution photos for months, meticulously examining every pixel. One day, he focused on detailed scans that revealed the texture of the tomb's walls beneath layers of paint. He spotted what he believed to be outlines of two doorways that had been blocked and plastered over to hide them from view. The more he looked, the more it seemed real. Could it be a tomb within a tomb? Nicholas theorized there was a hidden storeroom behind the western wall of King Tut's tomb, and his chamber might just be the outermost section of a larger corridor-style network of rooms. It all sounds fancy, but sorry to break it to you, Reeves' theory was debunked. To find out if he was onto something, experts had to use ground-penetrating radar to see the unseen. Reeves' idea was that if there were gaps, it could indicate the presence of additional rooms. And at first, in 2015, one expert even thought he had found a hidden room. But the glory didn't last for long. A year later, after double-checking, it turned out there were no hidden doorways. By the way, Nefertiti isn't the only legendary woman from Egypt whose burial site remains a captivating mystery. There's a cool legend about Cleopatra that you might enjoy. It's said that she once declared, "No man will ever find my tomb." Kind of fitting, right? After all, the person who's come closest to uncovering her final resting place is a woman. Fast forward a few millennia after she passed away, and while no man has located it, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez believes she might have cracked the code. She's been on the quest for Cleopatra VII's tomb for nearly 20 years, and recently discovered a bust that she thinks represents the famous queen. However, not everyone is on board with her claim. Some experts argue that the bust doesn't resemble Cleopatra at all. Alongside this intriguing marble statue, Martinez's team also unearthed 337 coins, some of which, less controversially, feature Cleopatra's likeness. But the real part is that it's still not officially confirmed. There's no doubt about the existence of the small bust. It's carved from white marble, fits in one hand, and shows a woman wearing a royal crown, according to a translated statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The big question, though, is who it actually depicts. While Martinez insists this statue is a representation of Queen Cleopatra VII, many other archaeologists argue that the facial features don't match, suggesting it likely belongs to a princess instead. Sorry, I can't resist the temptation of breaking the magic for a moment. Some folks believe that the whole idea of "no man will find my tomb" is misunderstood. Even if she did say it, what she probably meant was "no living soul," and it wasn't about gender at all. It can as well be just a beautiful legend. Toodaloo!
For more than 3,000 years, the gold mask of Pharaoh Tutankhamun stayed hidden in the Valley of the Kings. This artifact, which stands about 21 inches tall, shows how skilled and artistic the ancient Egyptians were. But nobody expected that X-rays would reveal its biggest secret. King Tut was the last ruler of his family during the 18th dynasty. He took the throne at just 9 years old, but ruled for only 10 years before he passed away unexpectedly. If we're being honest, back in ancient Egypt, he was mostly forgotten by the rulers who came after him. His tomb wasn't a big deal for them, so much so that even the grave robbers forgot about him. It might sound a bit sad, but the truth is that it was actually great news for us. Since his tomb was practically forgotten, it ended up being perfectly preserved. While the other tombs in the Valley of the Kings were looted, his remained sealed and untouched. So when it was discovered back in 1922, it had over 5,000 precious objects inside. That made Tutankhamun basically an instant celebrity and one of the best-known pharaohs nowadays. Among the treasures was the most stunning piece, his golden mask. This mask is said to be an exact image of the king's face, or at least it was supposed to be, but we'll get to that later. The purpose of this accurate representation of his face was to make sure that his soul would recognize him in the afterlife and return to his mummified body. In ancient Egyptian beliefs, this would allow him to continue living in the afterlife. The details of the mask clearly looked incredibly difficult to create, but people didn't realize how complex it truly was until many years later. The first X-rays of the mask were taken in 1967. Back then, the main reason for these scans was practical – conservation. The mask was heading to Paris for an exhibition, and it was the first time it had ever left Paris. This would help them keep track of any changes during the exhibit. Plus, the images could give clues about how the mask was made. But back then, they probably didn't fully realize just how complex its construction was. I mean, Egyptian goldsmiths didn't use modern soldering techniques. So, how did they make this mask? New X-rays taken in 2007 gave us some answers. It turned out the Egyptians didn't use pure gold, which is 24 carats. The mask was actually made of 23-karat gold, meaning it was mixed with another material. So specialists discovered that the gold sheets contained a small amount of copper, a reddish-brown metal. This was likely done to make the material more flexible and easier to shape. They would then shape the gold sheets by heating and hammering them over and over again. But there was one more secret inside the mask that wasn't discovered until 2015. The year before, the staff at Cairo's Egyptian Museum were working on the mask display when the long beard of the mask accidentally got knocked off. Another theory is that the beard had become loose over time and just fell off. Either way, the fact that King Tut's beard came off caused a lot of stress. After all, we're talking about one of Cairo's biggest tourist attractions, so the experts had to fix the problem quickly. The restoration process started with a detailed recording of the mask's condition. To do this, they had to take a full three-dimensional scan of the artifact. And, by accident, they found something very interesting in the mask. Inside the royal beard, there is a gold tube, an intriguing structure that the Egyptians likely used to attach the beard to the rest of the mask. And that proved, once again, that the process of making this mask was even more complex than experts thought. But the mysteries don't stop there. Remember how we mentioned that the mask was thought to perfectly represent King Tutankhamen's face? Well, that might not be entirely true. Some popular theories suggest the mask was never meant for him and was actually made for someone else. A study published in 2015 suggested the mask was originally made for a female pharaoh, his supposed stepmother, the famous and beautiful Egyptian queen Nefertiti. The biggest clue comes from an inscription on the mask. At first glance, it seemed to belong to Tutankhamun. But after a close examination, researchers noted that something else was actually written underneath King Tut's name. The royal name stamp seems to have been altered, and originally it had something written on it that translates to Queen Nefertiti. There is another feature of King Tut's golden mask that was overlooked for years, which adds even more mystery. As we mentioned earlier, experts believe he wasn't respected much by the pharaohs who came after him. And one of the clues that made archaeologists think this is the pierced ears on the mask. Some researchers believe that King Tutankhamun wouldn't have worn earrings after he was a kid. So, according to their theory, by the time he passed away at 18, he shouldn't have been represented with pierced ears. This could also support the idea that the mask originally belonged to Nefertiti, or maybe to someone who wasn't even connected to King Tut. But the mask isn't the only source of mystery. In fact, his whole tomb is full of puzzles. Recently, historians found a sign that the place where King Tut was supposed to be buried was changed at the last minute. For years, experts wonder why a pharaoh who ruled for 9 years ended up in such a simple tomb. When compared to the grandeur of other pharaohs' tombs, his tomb seemed, well, a bit plain. The idea that a king like Tutankhamun would have such an unremarkable resting place just doesn't match up with the power and importance he must have had in ancient Egypt. So, what happened? Well, apparently, this might have something to do with his successor, Pharaoh I. After King Tutankhamun passed away, researchers believe that I made sure to erase him from Egypt's history. So, one theory suggests that he was probably behind the quick decision to place King Tut's body in a smaller, less impressive tomb. When experts looked at I's own tomb, they found something interesting. There is a large wall covered in painted baboons. This is the same type of artwork found in Tutankhamun's tomb. It seems like the same person might have chosen the artwork for both tombs. Now, the design and decoration of the two tombs are almost identical, suggesting there was a shared hand behind both. But there is one key difference. I's tomb is fit for a king. It's much bigger and more impressive, even though the style and artwork are similar to what you see in Tutankhamun's tomb. So the theory suggests that I decided what went into both tombs. Since Tut passed away unexpectedly at a young age, his grand tomb wasn't finished in time. Normally, pharaohs start building their tombs while they're still alive to make sure everything is perfect. But Tut passed away when he was just 18, so there wasn't enough time. I may have taken advantage of the situation, ordering a smaller tomb for Tut and keeping a larger one for himself. Experts believe this theory explains why Tutankhamun's tomb is so simple and how I managed to wipe his memory from history so easily. But in the end, the story of King Tut's mask and tomb is full of mystery and intrigue. Each new discovery sheds more light on what really happened all those years ago. But one thing is for sure, the secrets of ancient Egypt still have much to reveal, and King Tutankhamun will continue to fascinate people for years to come. So looky here, scientists discovered ancient artifacts near King Tut's tomb. Turns out, his VIP final resting place looks more like a public graveyard with about a dozen wooden coffins that's been there for around 3,600 years. Okay, I might have exaggerated a tad. The 11 tombs weren't exactly right next to King Tut, but they were close, near the same city of Luxor. New findings in Egyptian tombs can help us piece together what life was like in ancient Egypt. And guess what? Ancient Egyptians seem to have been remarkably like us, modern humans. Say, the women have always loved jewelry, and archaeologists retrieved a beautifully made necklace with 30 amethyst beads and 2 agate beads, plus a hippo head amulet. Bet it was all the rage back then. Researchers also discovered 2 copper mirrors. One had a handle shaped like a lotus, and the other was decorated with Hathor, the ancient Egyptian deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love. These recent excavations near Tutankhamen's burial site led to another jaw-dropping revelation. For the first time in thousands of years, fragments of Queen Hatshepsut's Valley Temple were uncovered. This fearless woman was thought to be the second female pharaoh, who ruled with both courage and wisdom, leaving a legacy as solid as the stones themselves. Her temple, hidden for ages, opens a window into a time filled with power, intrigue, and spiritual devotion. Archaeologists found over 1,000 beautifully decorated stone blocks on the outskirts of Hatshepsut's funerary temple. There were very few women who managed to take the throne in ancient Egypt. Another tomb was found nearby, and it belonged to the overseer of Queen Teti Sheri's palace, whose name was Jehuti-Mez. Queen Hatshepsut seems to have even more tombs, aces up her sleeve. These tombs were carved into the rock instead of being built as pyramids, showing a unique ancient perspective on how to protect the soul in the afterlife. Experts managed to retrieve some cool ancient pieces from the site. Toys made of clay, mummy masks, winged scarabs, and some amulets. Sadly, there surely used to be way more artifacts, but over the last centuries, there have been people other than archaeologists to stumble upon this site. It's likely that looters got to these tombs before them and may have taken some valuable items. But they did leave behind some cool stuff for the researchers, like pottery used for offerings of bread and meat, along with archers' bows that connect the tomb's owners to the Egyptian military. Meanwhile, soul protection is way more important than you might think, especially if you're roaming around Luxor looking for ancient secrets. You aren't scared of King Tut's curse, are you? Let me tell you what happened to those who weren't scared, but promise me to take it with a dash of salt, okay? For years, Egyptologists, especially those who believed in paranormal activity, were convinced that there was an unsettling curse surrounding Tutankhamun's archaeological discoveries. This belief stemmed from the mysterious and untimely demise of several excavators who discovered the tomb in 1922 with no logical explanation for why they passed away. It was just easier to chalk it up to something supernatural and avoid the whole mess. But it turns out it wasn't a curse at all. It was likely the radiation that caused those excavators to perish. Now, you might wonder where the radiation came from. After all, while radioactivity was discovered in the 19th century, ancient Egyptians, despite their impressive pyramids, didn't have any radium lying around to make Tut's tomb glow like crazy. So, what could be the real story? It might have been toxic waste behind it all. Toxic levels of radiation from uranium and hazardous waste have been lurking inside the tomb since it was sealed over 3,000 years ago. The burial chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb reportedly has such high radiation levels that anyone who steps inside could easily end up with a fatal dose of radiation sickness or an incurable condition. By the way, you can have a somewhat similar level of radioactivity if you don't get rid of those moldy dinner leftovers you left to perish in your fridge a month ago. But this radioactivity isn't exclusive to Tutankhamun's tomb. Ancient Egyptian artifacts discovery is rewarding yet dangerous due to unusually high radiation levels in Old Kingdom tombs all over Egypt. Geiger counters have detected radiation at 2 sites near the Giza pyramids, and radon, a radioactive gas, has been found in several underground tombs in Saqqara. Interestingly, experts believe that the builders of these ancient tombs were aware of the toxins, as some eerie warnings were carved into the walls of many tombs. One inscription ominously declared, "They that break this tomb shall meet their end by a malady that no doctor can diagnose." Other ominous phrases like "forbidden," "due to evil spirits," only added to the fear that supernatural curses haunted these ancient sites. Ominous signs have stunned archaeologists since forever, but the fear grew even stronger a century ago with the mysterious passing of Lord Carnarvon, who funded King Tut's excavation in 1922 and reportedly explored the treasure-filled rooms, along with several others who entered the tomb. Arthur Weigall, another British Egyptologist who was present at the tomb's opening and is credited with starting the curse myth, passed away young when he was just in his 50s in 1934. Chances are the condition that made him pass was connected to radiation. In total, 6 out of the 26 people who were there when the tomb was opened met their end within a decade from various causes. Not only X-ray exposure, those reasons include asphyxia, stroke, heart failure, pneumonia, and even poisoning. Well, isn't this getting a little grim? There was one guy who opened the tomb and somehow managed to avoid the infamous curse, Howard Carter, or so it seemed. Some folks pointed to his survival as proof that the curse wasn't real. After digging up the tomb, Carter published several books on the topic and shifted gears from archaeology to dealing in antiquities for various museums. Despite dodging demise or injury, rumors swirled about how the curse may have impacted him in other ways. One of the big stories linked him to Lord Carnarvon's daughter, Evelyn. Some said he was madly in love with her, but she married someone else, so he chose to stay single. Others claimed they had an affair while she was in Egypt, which ended when her father passed away and she left the country for good. However, there wasn't much evidence to support these stories. Evelyn was just 6 when they met, and they remained friends until his last breath. She was even one of the few attendees at his funeral, but denied any romantic involvement, saying they weren't that close. A year after the revolutionary discovery near King Tut's tomb, Evelyn married politician Sir Brograve Beauchamp and had a daughter. That same year, Beauchamp toured the tomb with his parents, guided by Carter himself. Carter never married and, aside from those posthumous rumors about Evelyn, had no other romantic connections. While the curse adds an intriguing twist to his life story, his tendency to keep relationships at arm's length was evident long before the tomb was opened. It seemed Carter just wasn't a people person. In 1939, after battling a serious illness, he ultimately succumbed to fate. He was 64, which was a pretty common life expectancy in the UK back then, so no one really thought it was off and linked it to an ancient curse. When he passed, it turned out he had several artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb in his London apartment, which were eventually sent back to Egypt, marking what some viewed as the curse's end. Who knows? Maybe if he hadn't had all those ancient souvenirs at his place, he would have lived way longer. But all the other demises might seem off. The curse theory was likely fueled by some strange events during the excavation. Carnarvon got a mosquito bite that became severely infected, and around the time they opened the tomb, Cairo experienced a bizarre power outage and a freak sandstorm. Back in England, the Earl's dog, Susie, managed to escape from Carnarvon's house and began barking frantically at seemingly nothing. At least that's what the staff and family saw. Strangely enough, at the very moment her owner's heart stopped, Susie started howling and fell down without showing any signs of life. Maybe radiation didn't play a crucial role after all, and those were indeed ancient artifacts from King Tut's tomb that made them all perish. Spooky, huh? Unlike many other ancient Egyptian burial grounds, King Tutankhamun's tomb stayed hidden and free of unwanted thieves for 3,000 years. One reason was that the tomb was smaller than average and tucked away in a place called the Valley of the Kings. This area was already being extensively explored by the time they stumbled upon Tut's spot. The entrance was all covered in debris from building a nearby tomb, which must have also helped keep it a secret. There were also zero writings or signs on the outside of the tomb. Time passing also played a part in keeping it in amazing shape until the 1920s, when a man named Howard Carter finally made it in. But was Carter that big of a hero? Some recent findings say he might have been sneakier than initially thought. People used to think Carter wasn't just a glorified treasure hunter, he was a true archaeologist. Before Tut, he had been on a relentless quest for Egyptian artifacts. He discovered his interest in these unusual objects when he was a child, and soon started drawing the sculptures and inscriptions that were found in ancient tombs. After stumbling upon the remains of King Tut, Carter spent a decade recording and processing all sorts of objects, like golden thrones, chariots, and statues from Tut's tomb, shipping them down the Nile to Egypt's museum in Cairo. Well, at least that was the official story. More recent discoveries claim that not all of the objects made it to Egyptian officials. A secret letter seems to uncover Carter's little 10 for them, 1 for me policy. The letter in question was sent to Sir Alan Gardiner, a philologist and friend of Carter's, dated from 1922. In these writings, Carter mentioned having found the tomb and was asking his buddy for some advice. In another letter from 1934, Gardiner seems to be thanking Carter for an amulet, which was sent to him as a thank you gift. Carter was adamant that it didn't come from Tut's tomb, but evidently it did. Even the British director of the Egyptian Museum was onto Carter's sneaky endeavors, but couldn't prove it. He compared Gardiner's amulet to others from Tut's tomb, and lo and behold, they were a perfect match. Gardiner was so disappointed to have been put in such a sticky situation that he vented to Carter in another letter. Deciding to be a good friend, Gardiner didn't throw the famous archaeologist under the bus. Instead, he advised Carter to take those stolen goods back to Cairo, just like he'd advise you to like this video and subscribe to the Brightside channel for more amazing videos on the most unique topics in history. It's not the only shady piece of information on Carter's post-discovery behavior. In 1947, a man named Alfred Lucas, who used to work with a controversial archaeologist, gave some information in an obscure journal in Cairo. He claimed that Carter sneakily cracked open the burial chamber door himself. Then he sealed it back up like nothing had happened before the official uncovering. Now, why would he do that? Well, the same theory suggests that Carter and his crew might have entered the tomb early so they could get their hands on some ancient goodies. Obviously, these people couldn't risk having such objects sold while they were still alive, but made sure they were auctioned off after they passed. Carter, though, never confessed to anything. He made no official denial either, but the Egyptian government couldn't risk any more mysterious disappearances, so they prohibited him from entering the tomb for a while. Some have connected this apparent stealing to the curse of King Tut. If you've never heard of it, know that it became quite the scary tale soon after King Tutankhamun's resting place was uncovered. It claimed that anyone messing with the tomb of the boy pharaoh would face some serious bad luck. It's not all dramatic like a mummy going on an aggressive spree, but word got out that the people involved in disturbing King Tut's lair met some mysterious, untimely ends. The main untimely passing related to this supposed curse is that of George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He was this British aristocrat who helped fund the search for the tomb. He passed away just a year after the tomb was opened. Now, people love to call it mysterious, but it turns out that Herbert was already in pretty bad shape health-wise when he got to Cairo, and he ended up getting taken down by a regular disease. Now, let's talk numbers. There were a lot of people linked to this tomb opening: security guards, archaeologists, and supporting staff. And sure, a few of them did pass not long after the tomb started receiving visitors. As much as we'd like this curse to be true for the sake of, good storytelling, statistically, if you have a bunch of people connected to opening a tomb, you'd expect some passings just by random chance. The average lifespan for those supposedly targeted by the ancient curse was more than 20 years after the spell was supposed to kick in. Herbert's daughter even lived until the 1980s, that's half a century later. And Howard Carter himself lived until 1935, a solid 16 years after the big reveal. Some have suggested that the whole curse was nothing more than a careful PR strategy. You see, when Tut's tomb was found, Howard Carter wanted to make a priority out of keeping nosy reporters away. So he might have come up with a curse hanging over anyone entering the boy king's resting place. But what was stolen from King Tut's tomb anyway? Well, some jewelry to begin with. It might have been snatched by Howard Carter himself, according to a French specialist. He did some intensive research by looking at old pictures taken from inside the tomb back in the 1920s. He compared those images to various objects from museums and auction houses. He soon started to piece together the whereabouts of some of Tut's jewelry. First up, there's this collar that used to be on Tut's chest. It was all broken into pieces, and some parts went via Carter to the Nelson Atkins Museum in Missouri. Meanwhile, other bits ended up on a necklace owned by some unnamed people who tried to sell it in 2015 but failed. Even the Nelson Atkins Museum agrees, as they've confirmed the information on their website. Then there's a headdress piece. Some beads from it that once belonged to Tut apparently got stolen by Carter too. They were also strung into a necklace and are now being held at the St. Louis Art Museum. Another fancy collar made out of glazed ceramic magic spent some time at the Met, far away in New York. Thankfully, it was sent back to Egypt a bit over a decade ago. This seems to have been, as you'd expect by now, also stolen by Carter. Missing artifacts aside, King Tut still gave a ton of amazing objects that helped us learn more about this incredible ancient culture. Starting with the famous burial mask. It's this massive 21-inch gold art piece with semi-precious stones and glass paste. It weighs 22 pounds and showcases the boy pharaoh with a long beard and a headdress with a cobra and vulture. On the back, there's this spell from an important ancient Egyptian spiritual book that's supposed to make sure it works just as well in the afterlife. Tut was also apparently a board game enthusiast. They found 4 board games in his tomb, some made of ivory. Archaeologists also found a pair of gold sandals, though you'd imagine they were more for show than for comfort. In fact, the pharaoh probably never wore them in his lifetime. Now, speaking of fashion items, it turns out Tut was quite the fancy ruler. They even found a mannequin in his tomb that was used to pick out, adjust, and store his outfits and jewelry. The boy king seemed to have also enjoyed some music, based on the 2 trumpets historians found in his tomb. Though they were played back in 1935 in a BBC broadcast, the instruments are today considered too fragile to be maneuvered.
Earth isn't a perfect ball, we know that. But the real mystery is miles beneath our feet. Way down below the crust, the planet has been cooling down for billions of years, just not evenly. The Pacific side loses heat faster, while the African side slows that loss by trapping it longer. That difference is why Earth stays restless, with earthquakes tearing the ground apart and volcanic fire breaking through the surface. Think of Earth like a massive engine that's been shut off. The outside cools first, but deep inside, heat lingers. That internal heat is leftover energy from when the planet formed, and it's been slowly trying to escape ever since. For a long time, scientists assumed Earth lost heat evenly in all directions. Hot in the middle, slowly cooling everywhere else. But when a team at the University of Oslo ran simulations that rewound the planet 400 million years and tracked where the heat actually escaped, they saw something very different. The cooling wasn't symmetrical at all. One side of the planet is doing it faster than the other. The difference is striking. The Pacific Hemisphere, the side dominated by the world's largest and deepest ocean, has cooled by about 50 degrees Kelvin, which is roughly 90 degrees Fahrenheit difference, compared to the Africa-Eurasia side. The reason is basically insulation. Africa and Eurasia are on a layered ancient continental crust. The Pacific side is the opposite. It's mostly ocean, resting on a much thinner crust where warmth escapes easily. Plus, the cold seawater on top pulls that heat out non-stop. Because the Pacific side is cooling so fast, the rock deep underground is getting heavy and sinking back toward the core. It's like a giant slow-motion conveyor belt that drags the Earth's crust down with it. Heavy materials sink. As it sinks, it pulls on the edges of tectonic plates, creating stress, trenches, earthquakes, and chains of volcanoes. Most of Earth's earthquakes and volcanoes happen in a giant loop called the Ring of Fire. This is where the ocean floor gets cold, heavy, and sinks deep into the planet. All that sinking rock travels thousands of miles down until it slams into a massive continent-sized structure sitting right near Earth's core. Scientists call this a blob because the heavy ocean floor is constantly falling on top of it. The Pacific blob is squashed flat and pinned down, sitting heavy and locked in place. But the other half of the world is doing the exact opposite. Under Africa, there aren't many sinking plates to act as a weight. Without that pressure holding it down, the African blob is free to grow tall and light. It pushes upward, lifting the ground from below and reshaping the entire continent. In fact, that rising bubble is already starting to tear the surface apart. In East Africa, a massive crack known as the Great Rift Valley is slowly opening up as the ground is pushed from below. Eventually, the pressure will become so high that Africa will literally split in two, allowing a brand new ocean to rush into the gap. There's a cool theory that suggests these blobs might actually be the remains of an ancient planet named Theia. Some researchers believe that Theia crashed into Earth billions of years ago, and while part of it broke off to form the moon, some heavy chunks might have sunk deep inside our planet. So, the reason our interior is so lopsided might be because we literally have pieces of a different world buried inside our own. But that's just a wild theory. Whatever their origin, the blobs matter because they help split the planet into two different behaviors. On the Pacific side, cold slabs keep sinking down and piling up. On the opposite side, heat builds up deep and pushes upward over time. One half is dominated by downward motion, the other by upward motion. And this imbalance doesn't stop at the mantle. It shows up at the very center of the planet because Earth's inner core is still growing. Liquid iron around it gradually turns solid and attaches to the core. This process doesn't progress at the same rate everywhere. One side of the inner core builds up faster than the other. This might sound like it should throw the planet off balance, but it doesn't. Earth's interior isn't rigid like a solid metal ball. Over time, stuff inside can gradually move around. Gravity pulls everything toward the center, helping everything get a bit smoother and keeping the core pretty round. But pretty round doesn't mean perfect. If you want a real example of how uneven Earth is on the inside, look at the Indian Ocean. Where there's more mass underground, gravity pulls a little harder. Where there's less mass, it pulls less. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, there's a huge anomaly called the Indian Ocean gravity hole. In that spot, Earth's pull is weaker than normal, so weak that it can't hold the ocean's surface up at the usual level. The water actually dips downward. You wouldn't notice it sailing through, but you'd technically be sitting about 300 feet lower than the rest of the world's oceans. It's an invisible valley in the sea caused entirely by missing mass deep inside the planet. However, Earth isn't the only world hiding a messy interior behind a smooth surface. Even the Moon is like this. Over billions of years, Earth's gravity slowed the Moon's rotation until it locked into place, keeping one face permanently pointed toward Earth. That's what we know as the near side and the far side. This mattered early in the Moon's history. The near side always faced Earth, while the far side always faced deep space. That long-term setup affected how heat was stored and released inside the Moon. When NASA mapped the Moon's gravity using two spacecraft called Grail, they measured something called the love number. It's a value that tells scientists how much a planet or moon flexes under gravity. The Moon's love number turned out higher than expected, which meant its interior was softer than it should be. When scientists looked closer at the gravity data, they found that most of this flexibility came from the side facing Earth. The Moon's near side is softer and warmer deep down, while the far side is cooler and more rigid. Measurements suggest the near side mantle is significantly hotter and more volcanic. That difference shows on the outside. Because the near side was so hot and soft, ancient lava could easily punch through the crust and flood the surface. That created those big dark patches we see at night. On the other hand, the far side stayed colder and stiffer, so the lava never flowed the same way. Back on Earth, the Pacific has another quirk worth mentioning. Our planet isn't just spinning in place. It orbits the Sun at over 66,000 miles per hour, and the entire solar system is moving through the galaxy like a car driving through a swarm of bugs. Over long periods of time, objects drifting in from deep space are more likely to hit the side of Earth that's moving forward. And because the Pacific Ocean covers such a huge stretch of that side of the planet, it naturally ends up catching more impacts than smaller oceans or continents. This creates a strange coincidence. The same hemisphere that is leaking the most heat from within is also the world's biggest graveyard for things arriving from the outside. Because it is so vast and lonely, space agencies even use its most remote coordinates as a spacecraft cemetery at a spot called Point Nemo. We deliberately aim satellites and massive space stations like Mir to crash right there. So the Pacific ends up taking the hits from two directions, by accident from the universe and on purpose from us. Earth is restless, continents drift, oceans open and close. In a few 100 million years, the map will look completely different. The Pacific is actually shrinking right now. Eventually, the Americas might crash into Asia, and a new ocean will have to take over the job of being the planet's main radiator and its front bumper. But for now, we should probably be thankful for that massive, chilly, unlucky ocean. Saudi Arabia is digging a pit about 1,300 feet wide for a project called The Cube. It's a giant box meant to hold a full indoor city, right in the middle of another city. It's designed to hold more people than some small towns and surround them with ever-changing digital worlds. What's hiding behind this futuristic design? Let's find out. Sure, a sci-fi Minecraft block in the middle of a historic city would definitely be a landmark, but for these architects, that is just a side quest. They actually want to create a full-scale metropolis inside a single structure. This cube, known as the Macabre, will be the center of a brand new downtown district in Riyadh. The scale alone makes it one of the most ambitious construction projects on Earth. The plan calls for a perfect cube that stands over 1,300 feet tall and is just as wide. To put that in perspective, you could fit around 20 Empire State Buildings inside this thing. Everything here is stacked like layers in a massive high-rise, so instead of crossing streets, you'd ride high-speed elevators between levels. Inside that box, the plan is to build a colossal hall in the center. Concept art shows the roof as a massive curved screen that can project almost anything, a blue ocean above you or a sky from another planet. If it works, walking in won't feel like entering a normal building. It might feel like stepping into a different dimension. In the middle of that big space, there's a plan for a spiral tower. It's supposed to be even taller than the Eiffel Tower and have hotels, restaurants, and movie theaters inside. If you manage to book a room there, don't expect to see regular streets out your window. Instead, you'll get a view right into a massive hall, showing whatever cool digital scene is playing at that time. Surrounding this core, the rest of the cube is organized into layers that function like neighborhoods. It's a mix of homes, workplaces, and visitor areas with museums, indoor parks, and huge shopping districts. It's also supposed to have its own internal transit system to move you around, so you never have to step outside. In theory, this single building could house around 400,000 people at the same time. Saudi Arabia isn't spending this kind of money just to collect cool drone shots. The country wants less of its future tied to oil, and more of it tied to visitors, tech companies, and big international events. New Murabba, the district around the cube, is supposed to turn Riyadh into a once-in-a-lifetime sightseeing destination. On paper, the cube works like a city-sized resort mashed together with a business district. If you live there, you sleep in the tower, work in the layers around it, and go out to parks, malls, and digital-themed worlds without ever stepping outside. For tourists, it's a giant, all-inclusive future city experience in a box. The timing is no accident. Riyadh is hosting the World Expo in 2030 and the World Cup in 2034. Millions of people will fly in with cameras in hand. If the cube is finished by then, it will instantly be on every influencer reel and every top 10 things you won't believe exist on Earth video. That's the kind of free marketing you can't buy later. This entire dream world comes with a price. The wider New Murabba project, with the cube as its centerpiece, carries an estimated cost of around $50 billion. That's the annual economy of a small country poured into one district. Early satellite images showed an empty patch of desert on the edge of the city. Later images from 2024 show a huge square crater exactly where the cube is supposed to stand. Crews have already ripped out around 353 million cubic feet of earth, enough to fill thousands of Olympic pools. Zoom in and you'll see rows of excavators chewing through the ground like a metal army. That means we're way past the "is this fake" phase. Construction is already underway. The real question now is much tougher. Can you actually turn this thing into a working vertical city in one of the hottest capitals on the planet on time without creating the world's most expensive cautionary tale? First, there's the desert problem. Riyadh sits in the middle of a desert where temperatures can be extreme. In summer, afternoon temperatures can sometimes go past 113 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there. Now, a giant sealed box sounds like a perfect way to trap heat, which is great if you want to cook vegetables, but not so great if you want a comfortable city. The architects get it, so they designed the shape to help with temperature control. Instead of a flat box, The cube is wrapped in overlapping triangular panels based on traditional Najdi patterns. These triangles break up the harsh desert sun and add more shaded surface. They also leave small gaps where air can move through. The basic idea is simple: block some sunlight to keep the inside cooler. Even with that clever shell, cooling a place like this is still a huge job. You're basically trying to air condition a small city that someone stacked upright. Every single degree outside, every sandstorm, every long summer day pushes the system harder and sends the energy bill even higher. Then there's the fake sky problem. In the concept art, the center hall looks like something out of a sci-fi game. The ceiling and parts of the walls turn into one giant curved screen, so you don't just walk into a decorated lobby. You walk into an ocean scene, or a fantasy city, or a Mars landscape that surrounds you on all sides. That kind of trick already exists in a smaller form. The Sphere in Las Vegas, for example, covers its interior with huge LED screens and throws people into moving digital worlds. The Cube wants to push that even further. Its dome would need a display that's many times larger and can give high-end results without overheating. All of this has to fit inside a very unusual building. A normal skyscraper is just a tall tower, and engineers know how to handle that. The cube is more like a giant hollow block with a big empty space in the middle and whole neighborhoods stacked around it. It still has to stand up and hold the outer walls, plus the central tower and dome, while the inside somehow doesn't turn into a cramped maze. Then there's the people problem. On a busy day, you've got crowds moving around. In an emergency, you'll need to get them out fast. That's hard enough in a normal mall, let alone in a stacked mini city. While the cube looks like something from another planet, the main idea isn't. There are other examples of architects trying to squeeze everything they can into a single building. In Chengdu, China, the New Century Global Center already seems like a dream come true for introverts. It's huge enough to feel like a mini city under one roof. You can wake up in a hotel, stroll down indoor streets, and relax on a sandy beach under an artificial sun, all without seeing the real sky outside. Just outside Berlin, there's a huge old airship hangar that's now the Tropical Islands Resort. It's big enough to fit the Statue of Liberty standing up inside. While the countryside can be covered in snow, people inside are swimming in warm water, walking past palm trees, and hanging out under a fake summer sky. Saudi Arabia isn't new to giant futuristic projects. Neom, for example, includes plans for The Line, a straight, mirrored city stretching for miles across the desert, even after recent scalebacks. The same push is behind plans for huge stadiums and even a year-round ski resort in the mountains of the desert country. Which is not a bad thing, because even if these mega projects fall short, they push the limits of what cities can be. Thousands of years ago, people built pyramids that still confuse us. Today, technology finally lets us attempt something just as strange, only this time, it's a glowing cube in the desert. The cube is an experiment in how far we can bend engineering and imagination at the same time. Whatever the outcome, it's guaranteed to give us some exciting photos. Archaeologists were looking for the long-lost tomb of Cleopatra when they found something that seemed too good to be real. Roughly 43 feet underground beneath a ruined Egyptian temple, there was a perfectly straight tunnel carved through solid sandstone. The tunnel is over 4,200 feet long and so precise that experts called it a geometric miracle. The tunnel sits beneath an ancient city west of Alexandria, near Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The team that found it carefully peeled back layers of stone and debris until they hit this passage, about 6.5 feet tall, cut cleanly into bedrock. There were no collapse marks or wandering curves, just precision. If you've ever tried to drill a straight hole into a wall at home and failed within seconds, imagine doing this underground for nearly a mile. Ancient builders had no GPS, no lasers, no modern surveying tools. Yet, this tunnel stays remarkably level over its entire length. That means they understood gradients, angles, and distance in a way that goes far beyond stack stones and hope. Engineers today rely on machines to maintain that kind of accuracy underground. These people relied on knowledge, repetition, and patience. Parts of the tunnel now sit underwater or collapsed, probably after several earthquakes that struck the region centuries ago. Some experts think the tunnel may have once connected the temple to water sources or ritual areas closer to the sea. Archaeologists noticed that the Egyptian tunnel is an exact replica of the Eupalinos tunnel in Greece. It's believed to be one of the most important engineering achievements of antiquity, which only makes the Egyptian tunnel more special. Underground passages in ancient Greece linked temples to sacred springs. Back in ancient times, people moved through space in specific ways, underground and above, to reenact myths and journeys of gods. A tunnel like this could represent a path to the underworld, rebirth, or divine transition. Nobody would invest this much effort in construction just for decoration. Plus, in earlier digs at the site, archaeologists pulled up all kinds of artifacts, including coins with the names and faces of Cleopatra VII and Alexander the Great. They also found figurines, statues of deities, a mummy with a gold tongue, and even an entire cemetery packed with Greco-Roman style mummies. The perfect geometric tunnel isn't an isolated flex. Not far away, underwater archaeologists off the coast of Alexandria uncovered something that sounds like it belongs in a royal travel documentary. A 2,000-year-old pleasure boat that once glided along the Nile. And this wasn't just another fishing vessel or cargo barge. It likely stretched over 115 feet long and 23 feet wide, and had a decorated cabin, plus around 20 rowers, which turned the river into a moving palace. This isn't speculation pulled out of thin air. An ancient Greek geographer named Strabo wrote about these exact boats around the 1st century BCE. He described lavish vessels used by royalty during festivals and ceremonial outings in Alexandria. For years, historians treated that as a poetic exaggeration. Then, this wreck surfaced, and suddenly, Strabo sounded less like a storyteller and more like a witness. Even ancient art backs it up. The Palestrina mosaic from Italy shows richly decorated boats floating down the Nile. They match both the texts and the physical evidence almost perfectly. Inside the wreck, archaeologists found something small but incredibly human. Graffiti scratched into the wood in Greek. Just writing left behind by someone who stood on that deck 2,000 years ago. Researchers haven't fully decoded the text yet, but its existence alone matters. It tells us this wasn't just a floating symbol of power. People lived on it. It was sort of like a modern luxurious yacht, and the Nile was like a highway. All types of vessels with passengers were moving back and forth, visiting friends, carrying their goods for trade, doing business, and, of course, going on pleasure cruises. The location of the pleasure boat makes the story even better. The boat sat near the temple of Isis on Antirodos, an island that once hosted royal and religious buildings before earthquakes and rising seas erased it from the surface. That temple collapsed around 50 CE, and researchers believe the boat may have sunk during the same disaster. Another recent find that has to do with life on the Nile is the lower part of the massive worship complex about 10 miles southwest of Cairo. It connects directly to an upper temple dedicated to Ra, the Egyptian deity of the sun. The newly excavated part is a 4,500-year-old valley temple. The upper temple sits on higher ground, and archaeologists excavated it years ago. The valley temple is closer to the Nile, and it's connected to the upper part by a causeway. A German Egyptologist actually started excavating part of the temple back in 1901, but the groundwater sat much higher then, and he had to stop. Now, the groundwater level is lower, and a modern team has managed to excavate about half of the valley temple since 2024. Once they got in, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a columned entrance portico. Then they found blocks carved with a calendar of religious events, almost like an ancient public schedule. The text includes feasts for Sokar, a falcon-headed deity linked to Memphis, which was a major capital during the Old Kingdom, plus the festival of Min, a fertility deity, and even the procession of Ra. The calendar blocks all showed up around the entrance portico area, which most definitely means that the outside facade of the temple displayed this long feast calendar publicly. That's why archaeologists think this might be one of the earliest examples of a true public calendar ever found. A literal event list for an entire community, built into the architecture. On top of that, the team found dozens of decorated blocks covered in inscriptions that named a pharaoh who ruled around 2420 to 2389 BCE and had the temple built. This temple shows how people moved through ancient Egypt. Because the upper temple handled the main worship, but the valley temple made the whole place accessible. It acted like the landing area for boats coming in, either directly from the Nile or more likely from one of its side channels. So instead of hiking across desert terrain, visitors could arrive by water, step onto the temple's landing stage, enter through the valley temple, then head up the causeway ramp toward the upper temple on the hill. After about a century of use, researchers found that the valley temple had been repurposed into a residential area. And the best part is, what they found from that era: 2 wooden pieces used for playing Senet, an ancient board game. Senet shows up at other Egyptian sites too, including King Tutankhamen's tomb, but nobody fully agrees on the rules today. Some discoveries in Egypt create new mysteries instead of solving the old ones. Earlier in 2025, archaeologists announced the discovery of the first pharaoh's burial found in or near the Valley of Kings since King Tut's tomb in 1922. The newly found tomb of Tutmos II flooded almost immediately after burial. Ancient officials rushed in, removed the mummy and most of the grave goods, and hid them somewhere else. The weirdest part is that an alabaster ointment jar inside the tomb links the burial directly to Hatshepsut, Thutmose II's wife and half-sister. The inscription basically says she made this monument for him, which proves she arranged his burial. But it still doesn't explain why she placed him here and later chose the Valley of the Kings for herself. Now, archaeologists are studying a huge mound of rubble near the tomb, about 75 feet tall, and suspect it was built to hide something important. If a second tomb sits underneath, it could be complete and undisturbed. So, the deeper the archaeologists dig, the more ancient Egypt stops feeling like a gone civilization and starts feeling like a paused one. Looks like it didn't just survive time, it outsmarted it. And we're only just beginning to catch up. For over 3,000 years, no one knew this place even existed. And then, out of nowhere, archaeologists digging near Alexandria uncovered something absolutely shocking: a forgotten Egyptian city. This place is buried under Greek ruins, hiding secrets that could rewrite the history of pharaohs and their armies. And one of the artifacts, which looks like a simple wine jug, changed everything. We thought that we already placed all the important parts on the map of ancient Egypt: pyramids, Thebes, Luxor, Alexandria. But nope, the map just got an update. The new city was a big deal, and it's about 3,400 years old. It's just been discovered at the site called Kom el Nugus. This place is located west of Alexandria and tucked between the Mediterranean and a saltwater lake called Lake Mariut. This discovery raised a few eyebrows. Scientists thought that this place used to be empty and that it was only settled by the Greeks in about 332 BCE. But it turns out that people lived in Kom el Nugus way before that. When archaeologists were digging through Greek ruins, they started noticing something unexpected: mud brick walls. Yep, you know, the pyramid type. That's the kind Egyptians built during the New Kingdom. These mud bricks were made from mud, clay, sand, and straw. These ingredients were mixed with water and dried in the sun, not baked. Egyptians used them for thousands of years to build houses, temples, palaces, and yes, the pyramids. Of course, other civilizations did use mud brick too, but Egyptian mud brick is kinda quirky. They used straw that grew in their regions, layout styles, and mortar. That's what helped the experts realize that Egyptians used to hang out in Kom el Nugus. That alone raised eyebrows, and then they found more. An entire street layout, buried structures, and even a temple built by Ramses the Great himself. His name speaks for itself. This guy was one of the most famous pharaohs in all of Egyptian history. He ruled ancient Egypt for 60 years, fought huge battles, and just loved building tons of stuff like that temple. People loved him so much that later pharaohs literally pretended to be him or wrote his name on their buildings. That's when archaeologists realized that they weren't looking at some dusty mud bricks of a tiny village. That's an entire buried city. They immediately started digging more. Turns out the whole place wasn't random. It was built with great care. The streets had drains to stop rainwater from damaging the soft mud-bricked walls. There were also small tomb chapels with writings about soldiers. This suggests this place might have been the military base, and that changes a lot. In ancient Egypt, when the military showed up, there must have been a reason. So what was it? Protection? Conquest? Control of something important? In the case of this city, it was probably about wine, water, and trade on the edge of the desert. What's even crazier is that we still don't know just how big it was. The team has only uncovered part of it so far. There could be fortifications, warehouses, administrative buildings, or even more religious or royal structures waiting underground. We also don't know what this town was called in ancient times. That name is still buried. But it might be uncovered someday, maybe inside a wall, maybe on a scroll, maybe on another broken jug. One of those already turned out to be a mind-blower. A chunk of a ceramic jar, called an amphora, had a royal seal pressed into it, and that seal bore the name Meritaten. Princess Meritaten wasn't just anyone. She was the eldest daughter of Queen Nefertiti and the older sister of King Tutankhamun. Yes, that's right. Both Nefertiti and King Tut were involved here. All that was about a century before Ramses the Great built one of his temples here. Looks like the city was founded back in the days of another pharaoh, the pharaoh Akhenaten, husband of Queen Nefertiti, father of Princess Meritaten, and future king Tutankhamun. That guy, Akhenaten, was a bit of a wild card. He was the type who really gets weird about one of his interests. He tried to completely change Egypt's religion, forcing everyone to worship the sun disk called Aten instead of the usual deities. He basically told all Egypt that all their mythology was wrong, and from now on, there will be no more Osiris, no more Thoth or Set. Just raw sunlight only, people. That's known in history as the Amarna period. And he went all in. Changed his name, built an entirely new capital city called Amarna in the middle of the desert, redesigned temples, rewrote hymns, and even banned traditional religious imagery. Even the art got wild at the time. People started getting elongated heads, belly rolls, and all that humanity and vulnerability carved into stone. It was deliberately weird. He wanted to show the family not as perfect gods, but as human vessels of divine light. Everyone had to awkwardly smile and play along because he was the pharaoh after all. The wackiest part is that after his rule, his son, Tutankhamun, reversed all the sun disk-related stuff. He literally changed his name from Tutankhaten, which means living image of the Aten, the sun disk, to Tutankhamun, which means living image of Amun, one of the great older deities. King Tut brought back the old deities, reopened the temples, and erased as much of Akhenaten's legacy as possible. Looks like his family didn't really like the sun cult after all. Meanwhile, this discovered wine jug shows that the city was probably active, thriving with life during Akhenaten's times. That's huge. Up until now, there was no clear evidence that his radical ideas and projects extended all the way to the north. The jug also shows that vineyards and wine production reached all the way to the north in ancient Egypt. Wine really was a huge deal, worthy of placing a military base here. Princess Meritaten most likely used this jug. Just like with her brother, she was born into the sun and named after it. Her name, also spelled Meritaten, meant beloved of the Aten. As the eldest daughter of Pharaoh and his queen, born right into the middle of radical religious changes, she was raised to perform the future queen's duties. From her earliest years, she walked in temples alongside her mother Nefertiti, shaking the sistrum in solemn rituals. She was there when Akhenaten established his capital city, Amarna. He clearly loved his family. Meritaten's face was etched into its stone walls more than anyone else. In every temple, in every sacred scene, her figure appears, revered. Things get foggy in history after her father passed away. The throne wobbled. King Tut was very young, only 9 years old when he had to take new duties. Meritaten seemed to have been a brief step between her father and her younger brother. She married someone called Smenkhkare. History isn't even sure who that mysterious man was. Could have been a puppet, a phantom king in a crumbling dynasty. May have even been her brother. Whatever the truth was, these two took power and ruled together for a while. Meritaten got the title of the Great Royal Wife, a title of immense power. But Smenkhkare was a very short-lived ruler. He passed away just in about a year. There are some speculations among historians that Meritaten was the actual ruler, the informal female pharaoh, because her brother was too young. Some theories say that she raised Tutankhamun and became a sort of queen regent, mentoring the child who would be used to restore the old order. But all this is unconfirmed. It's very hard for historians to find information about that time because the Amarna period was later condemned. The successors wanted to wipe away Akhenaten's heresy and everything attached to it. This included Meritaten. So even if she ruled, even if she mothered Tut, they tried to bury her in the sands of history. In any case, perhaps this new uncovered city will tell us more about the mysteries of the Amarna period, one of the most chaotic periods of ancient Egypt.